Someone who was part of KTIB's long-standing sports history is David Lowry. He worked with Darren Fonts, covering many a sporting event over the years. So let's hear about some of those memories from the man himself. David Lowry, how are you today?
Doing fine, thank you.
Well, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from originally?
I'm from LaPlace. Was actually born and raised in Norco, Louisiana, but moved to LaPlace when I was 8 years old. And so I'm a River Parish's boy.
What high school did you go to?
St. Charles Catholic in LaPlace.
And I guess I'd safe to assume you also moved on to college from there?
Yeah, we went to Nicholls State on two different occasions. Had a 2-year stint at Nicholls and transferred to Southeast, and ended up going back to Nicholls, kind of going back and forth between Hammond and Thibodeau. But that's kind of how I ended up at KTIB anyway. So.
What was your degree program?
I majored in physical education. That was what I ended up settling on. And at my first stint at Nicholls, it was communications and doing sports broadcasts, but it just didn't look like that was going to pan out. So I went into coaching and was heading in that direction. And for some reason, I ended up back in broadcast, and I have Darren Fonts to thank for that.
Well, let's talk about that. How did you first get linked up with KTIB?
Well, Darren Fonts and I had become friends when Darren and I were both going to Southeastern. He was doing football games for Amy High School back home on the North Shore. And he and I being friends, and I would tag along with him and go to ball games. And initially, his first color man was his cousin, Jimmy Lewis. And I ended up joining the broadcast team as a statistician. And then Jimmy got transferred to a pharmaceutical job in Alabama, and it left a void, and I filled in and was excited to do so. I was fortunate enough the first couple of years were a little bit shaky. There were some games we laugh about them now because it was like calling Hindenburg every Saturday. But then when I guess about our third year as a team, Darren got a chance to follow the team all the way to Montana in the 1AA playoffs. So we went, I guess we saw every spectrum from Nicholls struggling a little bit football-wise, and then they had some success in our last couple of years.
What was the first year that you started with KTIB?
I want to say 1990, I believe, was the first broadcast year. That was the first time I was on the air.
Okay. 1990. Now, when you did the broadcast, was it just for football, or if my memory's right, did you also do basketball?
I did baseball and football, and I did public address for Nicholls State basketball. So I was not able to help Darren with the broadcast of basketball. But I did do baseball and football and traveled pretty much everywhere with baseball. So we had a pretty good two-man team for baseball, and I always thought that baseball was more my strong suit than than football. But and the color thing, there's so many different angles you can take. I mean, I didn't want to take as an angle like I've been coaching forever, which I hadn't. So my angle was more on statistics and drive tendencies and play tendencies and that kind of thing. Some things that you normally don't hear in broadcast, we tried to add in while we were doing our broadcast. And I thought we did a pretty good job.
So if my math was correct, if you started in 1990, then I guess Phil Greco would have still been football coach, right?
Yes. Coach Greco was the football coach my first year, and then Coach Rhodes came in, and then after Coach Rhodes, Darren, oh good boy, I can't remember Coach's name.
Coach Barbier.
Coach Barbier, yeah, Darren Barbier came in, and Darren was the one that took him to Montana, and that was quite interesting. A bunch of Bayou boys running around in the snow and ice in Montana.
Now, before we get to that successful season, one question I would like to ask is this: Coach Rhodes' tenure was only, I believe, 2 years here. Was it kind of surprising that it was so short?
I don't know how. I really don't know. I mean, Coach Rhodes was the kind of gentleman that was kind of to himself, and he had some expectations. I'm not sure that the expectations that he had equal to what it ended up actually coming through. And he was running as I recall, more of a run style offense, and they ran a smoke sky which is a triple I offensive attack with option. Really didn't have a whole lot of success throwing the football. So in those years with Coach Rhodes, if we got behind, it was very difficult to come back because he had a ball control offensive type system, and like I said, if something happened and they got off schedule, it was very difficult to make a comeback.
Now, and then we move on. Coach Barbier comes in, I believe, in 1995 in Silver, and since he coached with a lot of success in the river parishes, you must have been very intrigued when you heard he got the Nicholls job.
Yes, as a matter of fact, coming from Hahnville, that's a big step. A lot of people don't realize that. To come from the high school level and to come into 1AA football. There's a lot more to it than just X's and O's, just the handling of people and doing interviews on radio and all that type of thing that takes your time away. That's a little difficult. But Darren had some talent that he had inherited, and he brought some talent in, and he got a couple transfers in, and they made a really good run. And it was a pleasure to watch him.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, that first year at Nicholls was pretty tough. 1995, I believe they went 0-11 that year.
That's correct. And that's one of the train wrecks I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. But
every game was like, holy smokes, please stay tuned. Something's going to happen. We promise you.
Mm-hmm.
But they were going through some growing pains, and they finally, when they got their system in place, the ship got straightened, and they made a huge turnaround.
Exactly, because when you go into '96, they wind up going 8-3 in the regular season, and a top, I think it was a 16th seed in the playoffs. And the incredible part, which a lot of fans may forget, is that was only the second time in either Division 1A or 1AA history that a team went from winless to having a winning season the next year.
That's correct. And I mean, the thing that was incredible about it was that coming off the heels of a season where you don't win a game. Nobody expected them to be the type of team or the competitive team that they were, except for the guys that were on the field. And to their credit, and really to their benefit, a lot of teams said, well, this is Nicholls State coming in. They can't be very good. And people refused to believe that Nicholls had improved that much until the game was over with and they found that they had been beaten. And, it was and the thing was that to cap that the regular season off, to go to McNeese State and beat McNeese State over there was quite incredible.
Very much so. And then, not to sound picky, but the players from '96, is there any of them that really stand out with the success of that year?
The names. I'll say it's been so long. 4 kids ago, what struck me about that unit was their commitment to playing together. You had a kid like Brad Zeller, who was their quarterback, who was a kid from Lutcher High School that played, and Brad was one of a typical type Nicholls State player, to use him as an example. He wasn't expected to be a great college quarterback. He was a very good to excellent high school quarterback. Not a lot of people gave him a lot of credit and a lot of chance to be able to play at Nicholls. And he came in and he just, he's a coach. He was a coach on the field. And some of the decisions that he made that year, watching him, it was incredible. He just really did a good job.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, let's talk about the trip to, I guess you can call it the other frozen tundra, Montana. Unfortunately, Nicholls didn't do well in the game, but it must have been a real exciting time having to be part of a playoff team.
Well, I'm going to tell you, we really got fooled. And I'll tell you why. We flew into Montana. We get out, we get off the plane, we get to the hotel, we check in, and we go with the team down to practice by Montana's practice facility. And, I'm going to tell you, it was 45 degrees, maybe a little bit colder than that, and there was hardly any wind and no humidity. Some of the guys were going through practice with regular sleeves, not jackets or pullover, they were just going through practice, and it wasn't like we were freezing to death on a practice field. And in a lot of ways, it kind of hurt us because we go to bed that night, a bunch of us with Darren and I and the SID staff, we went out to eat that evening. Well, by the time we left the restaurant and we were walking back to the hotel, there was a front that had come through, and the wind was blowing, and it started flurrying. And by the time we got to the hotel, it was a blizzard. When we woke up that next morning, it was like the weather gods had completely reversed everything. And I don't know how cold it was, and I don't want to know how cold it was because it was unbelievable. I had every piece of clothing I had with me was on to do the broadcast that game. And when I went down to do the pregame interview with Coach Barbier, I told Darren, if I'm not back in 20 minutes, send a Saint Bernard dog after me or something because it was just unbelievable. And I'll never forget. There were big piles of what looked like snow, and when you went kick them, it wasn't snow. It was ice. The field was, in sections of that field were frozen, and the Nicholls guys were running around like they were on ice skates, and the guys from Montana were like elk. They were just bouncing out. They knew exactly where to run, kind of like watching the old Celtic teams when they played in Boston Garden. They knew where all the little patches and the little slick spots were, and they stayed away from those. And our guys were sliding and slipping all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And then, but of course, an end to a very successful season, as you just mentioned. After that, how many more seasons of Nicholls State did you cover?
Oh, I think it was. Let's see. I want to say there was one more season, and it was kind of bittersweet. We ended up, as a matter of fact, at the East game I told you about, I did not. Hillary Domain did color for that game. My oldest daughter was born that Thursday before the McNeese game, and I didn't get a chance to go to that game, and I left Mom and a newborn home to go to Montana. And a couple of things ended up happening. We had Darren decided to hang it up and go and take a job at E.D. White, and Ron Mears, who was the SID at Nicholls State, who was a close friend of mine. All those people started to leave, and it was just that was the biggest thing about my memories of doing it. It was how much, it was like we had a group of us that were really close and really, it was more about being with the guys, so to speak, and doing the broadcast, and it was a lot of fun. Road trips, as I don't know if you're aware, most of the times when Darren and I drove to games, we went with the SID staff in a state-issued car from Nicholls. So we have 5 big hungry guys in a station wagon with all the luggage thrown in the back, and off to wherever, San Marcos, Texas, or Pan American, Texas, or Kingsville, Texas, and I guess if it wouldn't have been for the group of guys we were with, we might have killed each other. But we leave Thibodaux, and it was nonstop cutting up and picking on each other from the time we pulled out to the time we got wherever we were going.
Mm-hmm. Now, also, before I forget, of course, you mentioned baseball as well. If my timeline is right, was the years you were calling baseball, was that mostly when Mike Knight was coach?
Yes, Mike Knight was the head coach pretty much that whole tenure. And I also, at that time when I was doing baseball, I also was serving as an administrative assistant for Ricky Broussard in basketball. And that was really like about a year and a half that I was in that position. So those road trips were pretty interesting, because not only was I working for KTIB and covering the games, I was also answering to the guy who was athletic director and baseball coach in Mike. So those, I was kind of pulled in a couple different directions when I go on those baseball trips.
Sounds like, it definitely sounds like your relationship with him was pretty well, and of course, one of the more established baseball coaches Nicholls State ever had.
Yes, and Coach Knight had been there since I had been there as my first go around in the '80s. And I had known him from our first stint, and then when I moved back to Thibodaux, we just kind of picked up from there. So I had the opportunity to meet a lot of folks there and befriend a lot of people.
And I mentioned, of course, Ricky Broussard as well, because here's a gentleman who, without a doubt, if Nicholls ever had a greatest basketball coach of all time, it'd have to be him.
Well, he's up there. Coach Broussard's thing, he was another one who pulled one of those worst to first kind of deals. But yeah, Coach Broussard was another guy like Coach Barbier that took a team, and he had some ups and downs. And I guess that was kind of the way things go at Nicholls. And he went out and got a kid by the name of Gerard King, who ended up playing after he was done in college, played for a championship team with San Antonio. Gerard came in and was a kid. I guess he was about 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", kind of lean, real thin. By the time he was a junior, he'd become a man. Not that 6'6" is a man already, but he got somewhere around 6'8". He got bigger shoulders, and he put on some muscle weight, and just was phenomenal. And Reggie Jackson, who was a kid that he had gotten from Baton Rouge, those two guys complemented themselves very well. They both banged the boards really well, and they were able to win the Southland Conference Championship and get themselves into the tournament. And they did it on 2 occasions. And Coach Broussard was a really good motivator, and he was the guy that, if you ever sat down with him and listened to him talk to a recruit, he was something else. He was a people kind of guy, and if he sat down with mom and dad, they were going to leave impressed with him, and he was that kind of guy.
Very much so. Well, let's tell listeners, what have you done since your KTIB days?
I am now at St. Charles Catholic High School. I came back home, and I am now the athletic director and head softball coach at St. Charles Catholic. I married Tricia Edwards, who Tricia worked with the softball team with Catholic Compton. And we have 4 kids. We have 2 girls and 2 boys. So we have our hands full with between going to swim meets and softball, baseball games. We spend a lot of time away from home, and then being an athletic director, and Tricia's also assistant volleyball coach at St. Charles. Our kids are growing up in the gym and on the baseball field most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And also, is my memory right that sometimes I heard your voice covering high school football for Kenny Trahan's show out in New Orleans?
Yes, I do. Kenny, I also am doing public address for UNO basketball, and that's kind of how I met Kenny. And Kenny had asked me to cover some of our games in River Parishes for him, and I'll call in with our scores with St. Charles Catholic scores, and then because most of the time we're playing our district is White and Letcher and St. James, of course. So there's a lot of interest on their show about that. So it's a lot of. I mean, that's another thing. It's a lot of fun to be involved in that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, listen, David, we really appreciate your time being part of our show. And before we head out, is there anything you'd like to say to all our listeners?
Oh no, it's an honor that you called and asked for my comments. It was a privilege to bring Nicholls State sports to so many people that were listening. It was when I look back on it, it was really a blessing. Sometimes you look back on things and you wonder, how did I end up in that position? And I truly believe that it was a blessing from above that I was able to do that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope people enjoyed listening to Darren and I carry on like clowns sometimes, but we always tried our best to bring an accurate call of what was going on in the field.
David Lowry, another member of KTIB's valuable broadcast